HB 1773 by Thompson of Brazoria, relating to named driver insurance policies and certain related exclusions.
Chair recognizes Mr. Thompson of Brazoria.
Mr. Speaker, members, House Bill 1773 prohibits named driver policies but allows insureds to add endorsement to a policy that excludes coverage for a driver specifically named in the endorsement. Move passage.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak on, for, or against House Bill 1773? Seeing no one? I'm sorry.
Mr. Speaker?
Yes, ma'am.
I have a few questions I'd like to ask the office.
Mr. Thompson, are you willing to come back to the mic? Certainly. Gentleman's returned to the floor and is happy to yield to your question.
Thank you. I don't quite understand what your bill is doing. Could you explain that again, and also explain the difference between what the current law is and what you're trying to change?
Yes, I'd be glad to. What this bill does is it prohibits the sale of the named driver policy. What that policy does is that it excludes drivers in a household unless they're named on the policy. What most policies do is there's permissive use of the vehicle. So with this endorsement, what it does is it takes that permissive use away.
So then there'll be no more permissive use. That would be the difference?
Well, in this policy, that's what it is. If they no longer sell this policy, then all policies would have permissive use, unless there was an endorsement that was signed specifically naming people that would not be, that would be excluded from the policy.
So you would name people that are specifically excluded.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Guerin.
Would the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
The gentleman yields, Mr. Guerin.
So, Ed, if I kept the policy that I currently have, anybody can drive my car that I allow. Is that correct?
That's correct, unless they're specifically excluded from the policy. In other words, if you signed an endorsement basically saying I exclude a son or a daughter, whoever.
I could exclude Miss Colford from driving my car then.
Certainly you could.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Doug Miller.
Would the gentleman yield for a couple of questions?
Yes, I'd be
Yield
glad
for
to.
questions. Gentleman yield.
Representative Thompson, let me ask you now, there are in the named driver policies, the situation that you're concerned about, if I understand correctly, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but is that when a person buys one of these policies, that only that person that's listed on the policy is allowed to drive that vehicle and have coverage, which complies with a law that was passed by this legislature called the Financial Safety Responsibility Act. Is that right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Whereas if you have a policy, as you said, permissive use, then anyone you give permission to is covered under that policy. That's the current situation.
Yes, sir.
Or one that's other than a named driver policy.
Yes, if it doesn't have the named driver endorsement on the policy, then the permissive use would be the norm.
Now let me ask you this. All right, let's say that you have one of these named driver policies, and I'm over at your house and we're having a Super Bowl party, and I need to run to the store to pick up some more chips and dips. And I'm not listed on your policy. You've got a named driver policy now, and I get in your car. You say, yeah, there's the keys over there, or I just take it, assuming that you've given me permission. I'm just going to run down to the store and pick it up, and I have an accident.
Well, if you're listed as in that residence, then you would be excluded from the policy. The permissive use does apply if you're not in the residence.
But I'm talking about the named driver policy.
Yes, sir.
I'm not named on your, you have a named driver policy, and I'm not named on it, and I have an accident.
If you live in the household, you would be excluded from the coverage.
Okay. And therefore, I would be in violation of the Financial Safety Responsibility Act.
That's
and
correct.
that's what you're trying to do with this bill, is to take care of that misconception that people have out there that they have coverage under this act. It's also a situation where law enforcement makes an assumption because those driver cards don't say that this is a named driver policy or this person isn't covered.
That's correct.
Now, if I have that accident and Mr. Caligari here has uninsured motorist under his policy, his uninsured motorist has got to cover him if I'm at fault in this situation.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
So his policy's got to pay, right?
That's right. Yes, sir.
So his premium and everybody else that has uninsured motorist is going to go up, right?
And he would have a deductible under his uninsured motorist coverage as well that he would have to pay.
And because you have a limited policy, a named driver policy, you're probably paying less in premium, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
Because there's less risk out there for the insurance company, right?
That's correct. Yes,
and
sir.
that's why they sell those policies, don't they?
Yes, sir.
You see them advertised on the billboards all over town. Buy me for $25, right?
Yes, sir.
And the reason they can sell it for $25 is because it only covers the one or two people that are listed on the policy.
That's correct.
And the rest of the people who are having to pay for it are people like Mr. Caligari and myself that are carrying uninsured motorists. So we're having to pay the freight for those people that are not paying the freight, right?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Okay. I think you've got a good bill.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield?
I'll be glad to yield the question.
Gentleman yields, Mr. Island.
What you're trying to do is stop the sale of junk policies, correct?
That's correct.
That mislead people and don't give them coverage.
That's correct.
And Mr. Lucio had a similar bill to yours, correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct. He did.
You have a good bill. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Move passage.
Excuse me, members, is there anybody else here wishing to speak on, for, or against House Bill 1773? Seeing no one, it is a record vote for its final passage, and the clerk will please ring the bell. Have all voted. So Mr. Fallon voting no. Have all voted. There being 108 ayes, 24 nays, the bill is finally passed.